What happens to the food you eat? This is not a simple exploration of the digestive system. Let me put it this way. You consume about a ton, 2,000 pounds of food every year. The average human produces 320 pounds of crap every year. So where does it all go? Well, some of that is water, right? No, the average human drinks over 300 gallons a year and only produces 150 gallons of pee. Where is it all going? But before all of that, this is going to be a simple exploration of the digestive tract. You may have learned in school that cellular respiration is how cells make energy. I'll try to make this simple because I hate chemistry just as much as you presumably do. Energy is stored in bonds. It takes energy to make bonds, and you get energy when you undo them. Food is something with a large amount of these bonds. In the case of vegetables, this is because a plant was saving it for later. In the case of meat, this is because an animal was saving it for later. In the case of some nuts and seeds, this is because a plant was saving it for its child. And in the case of dairy and eggs, this is because an animal was saving it for its child. And in the case of fruits, this is because a plant wanted you to eat it so you would crap out its child in an advantageous location. Anyway, these are stored in the forms of fats and starches. Being an animal, you store energy in the form of fat, which is stored in adipose, which is called fat, but isn't quite the same thing. We also have glycogen, which is like a starch but worse. And then there's proteins, which are complicated, and we'll get to them later. Anyway, we make it to the mouth. The mouth is full of saliva, which breaks down fat and starch with two enzymes that are helpfully named fat enzyme and starch enzyme. Also, you chew, which doesn't really do much besides break it down into small enough pieces that you can shove it down your food hole without it squishing your breathe hole. Saliva lubricates them. The esophagus doesn't do much. The stomach is actually very similar to the mouth. It doesn't really help that much with the actual breakdown of food. It mostly crushes it into a fine enough paste that you can fit it into an even smaller tube, which it also accomplishes via crushing things up and also dissolving it with enzymes. Now, in addition to fats and starches, the stomach is equipped with pepsin that breaks down proteins. The process of breaking down these molecules is not at all complicated. Imagine this run is a large macromolecule, this is water, and this is hydrolysis, bam, bam. Sometimes water isn't enough, so the stomach is also equipped with hydrochloric acid, which wants to be here way more. Also, there's some bacteria here, but again, the stomach doesn't really do the whole job. It just squishes it enough that it fits into the small intestine. Also, the acid kills them. The duodenum is where things really take off. Fat, in particular, is targeted most intensively by bile pumped in from the gallbladder. Fat is hard to digest because it doesn't dissolve in water because it's very well balanced. Bile has salts, which are very, very unbalanced and make the whole thing fall apart, so now we're just down to individual molecules. Like I said, fat is the animal way of storing energy. Animals don't like it when you steal all their energy, and life, I guess, but they can defend it by running away. Plants don't have that luxury, and thus prefer to make starches indigestible, so it's not worth it to eat them. So how do we? Well, Brunner's gland gets rid of the stomach acid, so bacteria can thrive. Bacteria has nothing but time to evolve, and also there's like way more than a million different species, so one of them will eventually make a breakthrough. A lot of bacteria let humans digest starch, and then there's also a lot more bacteria that doesn't help you do anything, but it doesn't hurt, so your body doesn't care. Anyway, we finally made it to the end of the ileum, not to be confused with the ileum. At this point, the food no longer resembles anything more than a massive blob of juices. Once these things are broken down, a protein into an amino acid, a starch into a sugar, and a fat into a glyceride, they're small enough to diffuse through the wall of the small intestine into the bloodstream, along with any miscellaneous ions your body needs for various purposes. From here, the tree splits. The food, the actual nutrients, and the point of what you were eating is gone. The remaining extra bits are still going into the large intestine, but we're going to follow the hepatic portal vein into the liver. In addition to the digestive system's cargo, the portal vein is also connected to the spleen and pancreas, mostly just because they're in the right area. Now, the liver basically does everything because it's the largest organ in the body. A lot of its functions aren't necessarily related to metabolism, so we can skip detoxifying and antioxidants and stuff. Basically, it serves as the relay point for all the food in your body. Lipids are packaged back into fat, which is stored all across the body. Sugars are packaged into glycogen, and amino acids are constructed into proteins, but that's not special. That's most of what all cells do. And when energy is needed by order of the pancreas, glycogen is reprocessed into sugar, fat is dissolved into sugar, and if things get really desperate, proteins can get deconstructed for energy. So, Let me explain that shorter. Food is made a bunch of bits and shapes. The mouth squeezes it into the stomach, which then squeezes it into the small intestine, which breaks it down into bits, and then the liver turns the bits into human shapes and also back into bits if needs be, and distributes the bits across the body. But like I said, not all food is bits. Some of it is stuff that not even our bacteria can digest, like fiber, which is good for bowel movements because it just sits there and soaks up water, and some of it just gets missed. Let's check out the other path down the large intestine. Now, if you'll remember, this is basically a blob of juices. Blood is good at picking up nutrients because it doesn't have any nutrients, so countercurrent exchange, or in other words, this blood moves on and is replaced with blood that hasn't had nutrients diffused into it. Repeat until all the nutrients are sucked out. But it's bad at picking up water and salt because it has plenty of those. If you emptied this entire thing, you would need crazy amounts of water. That's why the main job of the large intestine is to salvage as much water and salt as possible. The salt is the hard part. Once you get it over, the water wants to join it to equalize the concentration. That's pretty much it. Now wait, you may be asking, if vomit is like yellowish tan, how come drying it out makes it turn brown? Short answer, blood. Long answer, when red blood cells stop working, they're recycled into the bile used to break down fat. While most bile is cycled between the intestines and liver through a process called intestine-liver cycling, this blood byproduct that makes bile red, or red bile, isn't, and instead remains to leave a dark brown coloring on crap. But this still doesn't answer the question. Even if 1/3 of the water is absorbed, that doesn't explain where it goes. Where's the extra weight going? It's time to bring in a new system, the urinary tract. The urinary system is a lot more simple. Kidney, ureters, bladder, urethra. The kidneys serve a very important function of filtering blood, kind of balancing out the liver in that. How does it do that? Simple answer, it removes everything, then adds back in all the stuff you need. And then it empties out everything into the tubes and then out into your bloodstream. Like I said, only 150 gallons are released every year, still missing a ton of pounds. Not literally a ton. Side note, biology is not physics, it's not even chemistry. For most of these calculations, we're assuming all organic creatures are made out of pure water, which is mostly fine. It's certainly not the biggest source of error. So we're missing 3,000 pounds of it. Where is it going? Well, maybe 250 gallons is a better estimate for fluids consumed in a year. More importantly, when you breathe in, you intake O2, which is 2 oxygen atoms, but when you breathe out, it's carbon dioxide. Simplifying it, or imagining it's the same oxygen, and each breath is a small loss of carbon. It's a trade deficit, and you are being ripped off by the air. That's why I urge all conservatives to stop breathing. But how much does this actually add up to? Well, if you look at the weight of carbon dioxide exhaled in a year, switch it over to moles, then remultiply it to just the additional carbon, you get over 200 pounds of carbon exhaled yearly. Similarly, since the inside of your body is wet and the outside is dry, every time you breathe, you lose water. That adds up to something like 400 pounds. And finally, sweat. If you've been paying attention, we're missing about 2,000 pounds of body mass. In gallon terms, that's around 250 gallons, which is pretty much exactly what estimates give us. So, not exactly a huge mystery, but pretty interesting how only a small fraction of the mass we consume is released through the digestive tract, right? Okay, yeah, fine, I'll do Ordovician paleonomenclature next week. My name is Skylar White, yo. My husband is Walter White, yo. Uh-huh. He told me everything.